I never thought I'd be the one to shatter Sarah's life, but when I caught her husband in bed with my sister, I realized there was no way to protect her without destroying everything we had. Sarah had been my best friend since high school. We'd been through breakups, job losses, family struggles, everything. When she married James 6 years ago, I was thrilled for her. He seemed perfect, kind, funny, reliable. I trusted him completely. My younger sister Emily was also close to Sarah. The three of us had spent countless weekends together, laughing over wine or going on short trips. A few months ago, things started to feel off. James became harder to reach. He'd tell Sarah he had late meetings, yet his stories didn't always match. Emily, too, started canceling plans with me. She'd say she was busy with work, but I noticed she avoided events where James and Sarah would both be there. I told myself I was overthinking it. They were adults. Maybe life was just stressful. One Friday evening, I decided to surprise Sarah. She'd mentioned she wasn't feeling well earlier in the week, and I thought I'd drop by with her favorite soup and some flowers. I still remember pushing open her front door, which was unlocked, and hearing faint laughter upstairs. I called out her name, but there was no answer. As I walked up the stairs, the laughter turned into whispers. My stomach tightened. I reached the bedroom door and froze. There they were, James and Emily, my brother-in-law and my sister, in bed together. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like my ears were ringing, like the room was spinning. They didn't see me at first. I just stood there, my hands trembling, every part of me wanting to scream but unable to make a sound. Finally, James looked up and his face went pale. Emily sat up, pulling the sheets around her. I turned and walked out without a word. My legs felt like they might give out at any second. I got into my car and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Emily called me later that night, begging me not to tell Sarah. She said they hadn't meant for it to happen, that it just did, and that she really cared about James. Her voice cracked like she was the one hurt, but all I could hear in my head was Sarah's laugh, Sarah's smile, Sarah's trust in both of them. I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying the image of them together. I thought about the years Sarah and I had spent building our friendship, about how she'd drop everything for me if the situation were reversed. I knew I had to tell her, even if it meant she'd never look at me the same, even if it meant I'd lose my sister forever. Sarah and James looked like they had the perfect marriage. Whenever we went out together, people would notice how James always held the door open for her, or how Sarah would smile at him like she had won the lottery. They laughed easily together, finished each other's sentences, and never seemed to argue in public. I often thought she had found the kind of love most people only dreamed about. I trusted James. He had been nothing but polite and friendly to me since the day we met. We'd shared long conversations at family dinners and laughed over silly stories. I never saw him as anything other than Sarah's husband and my friend's partner. I trusted Emily too. She was my younger sister, and even though we didn't agree on everything, I always believed she had a good heart. She and Sarah got along so well that sometimes it felt like they were sisters too. I liked that my two favorite people in the world could be part of the same circle. But then little things started to change. James would sometimes pull out his phone in the middle of an evening and start typing quickly, smiling to himself. If Sarah asked who it was, he would just say it was someone from work. I didn't think much about it at first. He had an important job, and maybe he was just answering emails. Emily also began turning down invitations to hang out. If I asked her to join us for dinner, she'd say she was tired or busy with work. She used to love group nights, but now she had reasons to avoid them. Once or twice, I noticed she seemed nervous when I mentioned James. Her voice would change slightly softer, like she didn't want to talk about him. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. People get busy. Schedules change. Maybe James really was working late. Maybe Emily just needed more time to herself. I didn't want to be the kind of person who suspected bad things for no reason. There were moments, though, when something in my gut told me something was off. Like the time Sarah mentioned James had stayed late at the office, but I thought I saw his car parked outside a cafe near my place. Or the time Emily said she had to work late, but she didn't answer her phone for hours. Still, I pushed those thoughts away. I didn't want to imagine anything that could hurt Sarah. She was so happy with James, and I couldn't see any good coming from asking questions that might have ugly answers. So I smiled, nodded, and told myself I was imagining things. After all, Sarah and James were perfect together, and Emily was my sister. What reason could I possibly have not to trust them? It started with something small, something I almost didn't notice. Sarah had mentioned a while back that she and James were planning a weekend trip to the coast, but later she told me it had been canceled because James had too much work. Then, a few weeks later, I overheard James telling someone about how the weather was perfect that weekend at the beach. I remember feeling confused. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe he had gone for work. I didn't ask Sarah about it because I didn't want to sound like I was keeping tabs on her husband. Around the same time, Emily became harder to reach. Whenever I invited her to lunch or asked her to come over, she had some reason why she couldn't. She would say she was just busy but never explain with what. Sometimes her excuses sounded strange, like she had thought of them on the spot. If I pushed even a little, she would quickly change the subject. There were also moments when James and Emily ended up in the same room, and I noticed something different in the air. It wasn't obvious at first, but there was a kind of stiffness between them. They avoided looking at each other for too long, and when they did speak, their voices felt careful, almost rehearsed. I told myself I was overthinking, but the feeling stayed with me. One night, Sarah and James hosted a small party at their place. Emily came too, and everything seemed normal at first. People were chatting, music was playing, and drinks were flowing. I was talking to someone in the kitchen when I noticed James across the room. He was standing a little too close to Emily. She was laughing at something he said, but it wasn't her usual laugh. It was softer, almost shy. James's eyes lingered on her a bit too long, like he was forgetting they weren't alone. When Emily noticed me looking, she quickly stepped away and joined another group. James stayed where he was, sipping his drink and pretending nothing had happened. It was only a few seconds, but something about it stayed in my mind. I couldn't explain why it bothered me so much, but it did. After the party, I tried to push it out of my head. People stand close at parties all the time. Maybe I had imagined the look in his eyes. Still, I couldn't help replaying it in my mind, matching it with all the other small things. The trip James didn't mention, Emily's strange excuses, the awkward silences. I didn't want to believe there could be anything between them. Sarah was my best friend, Emily was my sister, and James was the man Sarah trusted with her whole heart. It seemed impossible, and yet, I couldn't shake the thought that something had started to shift, something I couldn't quite name but could feel in my bone. I didn't say anything to Sarah. I didn't want to hurt her over something that might just be my imagination. But deep down, I knew the first crack had already formed. It was a Friday evening when I decided to stop by Sarah's place without calling first. She had mentioned earlier in the week that she wasn't feeling great, and I thought I'd bring her some soup and flowers. It felt like a nice surprise, the kind of thing friends do for each other. When I got to her house, the front door was unlocked. That wasn't unusual. Sarah often left it that way if she knew someone was coming. I stepped inside, balancing the bag with the soup and the bouquet in one hand. The house was quiet except for faint laughter coming from upstairs. I called out her name, expecting her to answer, but there was no reply. The laughter turned into low voices, too soft for me to make out the words. My stomach tightened. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she had company or was on the phone. Still, something about the sound made me uneasy. I walked slowly toward the stairs, my footsteps light without meaning them to be. As I reached the top, I could hear them more clearly. Two voices, a man's and a woman's. My heart started beating faster. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I already knew those voices. I moved toward the bedroom door, which was slightly open. At first, I could only see part of the room, but then I stepped just far enough to see them. James and Emily. They were close together in a way that didn't leave room for any misunderstanding. James's hands were on her, and Emily's face was tilted up toward him. It was like my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. My body reacted before my thoughts could catch up. My hands started shaking so hard I almost dropped the flowers. My vision blurred, and I had to blink several times to keep from feeling dizzy. I didn't say a word. I didn't even think about it. I just stepped back quietly, careful not to make any sound. My chest felt tight, like there wasn't enough air in the room. My legs felt weak as I turned and walked down the stairs, each step heavier than the last. When I reached the front door, I pulled it open and stepped outside into the cool evening air. I didn't close it behind me as quietly as I meant to, but I didn't stop to see if they heard. My only thought was to get as far away as possible before they realized I had been there. I made it to my car and got in, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart was still pounding so fast it almost hurt. I stared straight ahead, not even starting the engine right away. I couldn't believe what I had seen. My sister and my best friend's husband. Together. It was something I'd never imagined in my worst thoughts, and now it was real. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and the flowers sat forgotten on the passenger seat, their bright colors mocking the reason I had come in the first place. I drove away without looking back. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them again, James and Emily, together in that way. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy, my thoughts spinning. I knew I couldn't pretend it hadn't happened, but I also didn't know how to deal with it. By morning, I decided I needed to talk to Emily first. I called her and told her to meet me at my apartment. My voice was flat, and I didn't explain why. She showed up looking nervous, avoiding my eyes as she stepped inside. I didn't waste time. I saw you, I said quietly, with James. At Sarah's house. Her face went pale, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she let out a shaky breath and sat down, holding her hands together in her. I didn't mean for you to find out like that, she said. But yes, we're together. And it's not just some fling. I love him. The words hit me like a slap. You love him. I could barely believe what I was hearing. Emily, he's married. To Sarah. She's my best friend. She trusts you. She trusts both of us. Emily shook her head, like she was frustrated I didn't understand. It's different with him. He makes me feel alive. I've never had this with anyone else. We didn't plan it, but it happened, and I can't just walk away. I stared at her, trying to make sense of what she was saying. You're talking about this like it's some kind of fairy tale. Do you even realize what this will do to her? She looked down, her voice softer. I know it's going to hurt her, but maybe she's not right for him. Maybe he and I cut her off. No. Stop. This isn't about who's right for who. This is about betrayal. You've been lying to her, and you've been lying to me. She didn't respond, and for a long time, the room was silent except for the sound of my own breathing. I thought about Sarah, her laugh, the way she trusted me, how she'd be the first to defend me if I were the one being hurt. I thought about how I'd feel if I were in her place, with everyone hiding the truth from me. I wanted to believe there was a way to keep the peace, to keep everyone from getting hurt, but the more I thought about it, the more I knew that wasn't possible. This wasn't going to go away on its own. Every day I stayed silent, I'd be part of the lie. Emily must have seen the decision forming in my face because she finally whispered, "You're going to tell her, aren't you?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, my sister, someone I'd spent my whole life protecting. And now she was the reason I'd have to break my best friend's heart. I can't keep this to myself, I said finally. She has to know. She deserves to know. Emily closed her eyes like she'd been expecting it, but it didn't make me feel any better. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, but I knew there was no going back now. I asked Sarah to meet me at a small coffee shop we sometimes went to when we needed to talk. It was quiet, with only a few people sitting at tables and the soft sound of cups clinking in the background. I got there early and sat by the window, my hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't even touched. My stomach was in knots. When Sarah walked in, she smiled like nothing was wrong, and for a moment I almost wished I could just keep pretending. She sat down across from me and started chatting about her day, but I could barely follow what she was saying. My mouth felt dry, and every time I thought I'd start, my throat tightened. She noticed. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. I looked down at the table. "There's something I need to tell you. It's not easy, and I wish I didn't have to be the one to say it." Her smile faded, and she leaned in a little. "You're scaring me. Just say it." I hesitated again, my heart pounding. "It's about James. And Emily." Her eyebrows pulled together, confusion crossing her face. "What about them?" I took a deep breath. "I saw them. Together. Not in a way friends should be. I didn't hear it from anyone else. I saw it with my own eyes." For a second, she just stared at me, like she was trying to figure out if I was serious. "You're joking, right?" she said finally, her voice almost a whisper. I shook my head. "I wish I was." Her face went pale, and she leaned back in her chair. No, that doesn't make sense. Emily's your sister." "She wouldn't." She stopped, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to believe it either," I said quietly. "But I can't lie to you. You need to know." She put her hand over her mouth, blinking fast like she was trying to hold back tears. "I trusted both of them," she said, her words trembling. "All this time." I reached out to touch her hand, but she pulled it back, not in anger, but like she couldn't stand to be touched. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping the floor. "I can't do this right now." "Sarah," I started, but she shook her head. Without another word, she grabbed her bag and walked out. She didn't finish her coffee, didn't even glance back at me. I watched her through the window as she stepped onto the street, moving quickly, almost like she was running from the truth I'd just handed her. I stayed sitting there, my untouched drink growing cold, knowing I had just broken her world apart. Sarah didn't wait long. The day after we met at the coffee shop, she called me. Her voice was steady, but I could hear something under it, like she was holding herself together with sheer will. She told me she was going to confront James, and she didn't want me there. She needed to handle it herself. That evening, I sat on my couch, phone in my hand, imagining what was happening at her house. Later, she told me how it went. She had walked in without warning. James was in the living room, scrolling through his phone like it was any other day. She stood there for a moment, watching him, until he finally looked up. "What's wrong?" he asked, frowning at the look on her face. She didn't ease into it. "I know about you and Emily." His eyes widened for a split second before he set his phone down. "It's not what you think." "Really?" she said. "Because I think it's exactly what it looks like. You've been sleeping with my best friend's sister. You've been lying to me for God knows how long." James stood, running a hand through his hair. "It was a mistake, Sarah. It just happened. We didn't mean for it to go that far." She stared at him, disbelief sharp in her voice. A mistake? You call it a mistake when it happens once. This was ongoing. You chose it. Over and over. He stepped closer, trying to soften his tone. It didn't mean anything. I love you. I don't want to lose you over something like this. Something like this? She repeated, her voice rising. You shattered our marriage. You destroyed my trust. And you did it with someone I treated like family. Before he could respond, Emily walked into the room. She must have been waiting upstairs, maybe thinking she could explain. She froze when she saw Sarah, but then straightened her shoulders. Sarah, Emily began. No, Sarah cut her off. Don't speak. I don't want to hear excuses. Emily took a step forward anyway. It wasn't just cheating. James and we care about each other. It was meant to happen. Sarah laughed then, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was sharp and bitter. Meant to happen? You're telling me betraying me was fate? That's your justification. Emily's voice wavered. You don't understand. You're right. I don't, Sarah snapped. And I don't want to. You both made your choices. Now you can live with them. She turned to James. We're done. There's nothing you can say to fix this. I'll have someone come for my things tomorrow. Then she looked at Emily. And you? I don't ever want to see you again. Sarah didn't give either of them the chance to respond. She walked out the door, her steps quick and certain, and didn't look back. Later, when she told me the story, her voice shook only once. When she said leaving that house felt like leaving her whole life behind. But she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just cut them both out in one clean motion. And from that moment, they were gone from her life completely. Sarah moved quickly. Within a week, she had a lawyer and had started the paperwork to end her marriage. She didn't tell James in person. She sent him the documents and left it at that. I think she was done giving him any more of her time or energy. When Emily found out I was still speaking to Sarah, she called me. Her tone was sharp from the start. So that's it? You're taking her side? It's not about sides, I said. It's about what's right. You hurt her. You knew what you were doing. She's not your sister, Emily shot back. I am. And you're throwing me away because of her. Her words stung, but I didn't respond right away. Finally, I said, you threw this away yourself, Emily. I didn't make this choice for you. There was silence, then a bitter laugh. Fine. Enjoy your new family. She hung up before I could say anything else. After that, Emily stopped answering my messages. My parents didn't get involved, but I could feel the tension in every family gathering. My mom would try to keep conversation light, but there was always an unspoken heaviness. My dad didn't say much at all. With Sarah, things weren't simple either. She appreciated that I told her, but I could see how much she was struggling. We would meet for coffee or just sit in her living room, sometimes not even talking. She was quieter than before, and though she tried to act normal, I knew she was still carrying a lot of pain. Our wider group of friends didn't handle it well. Some avoided the topic entirely, as if ignoring it would make it go away. A couple of them hinted that maybe I shouldn't have gotten involved. One even suggested I'd ruined things by telling Sarah. I didn't bother explaining myself to them. I knew I had done what I had to do, even if it made me the villain in some people's eyes. Still, the weight of being the one who told her stayed with me. I kept replaying that day in the coffee shop, her face when she realized what I was saying. It was like a permanent mark I couldn't get rid of. There were days I wondered if I could have handled it differently. Talked to James first, convinced Emily to come clean on her own. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't have changed the end result. The truth was out, and nothing could put things back the way they were. Life went on, but it was different now. Family gatherings were tense. Group hangouts felt hollow. Sarah was rebuilding her life piece by piece, and I was standing somewhere between two broken worlds, knowing I couldn't fix either one. Sarah started going to therapy not long after the divorce papers were signed. At first, she didn't talk much about it, but I could see small changes in her. She smiled more, even if it was just for a moment. She started making plans with friends who had always been there for her. Sometimes she still had bad days, but they didn't seem to swallow her whole like before. We kept in touch regularly. Sometimes she'd call just to tell me about something funny that happened at work or a new recipe she tried. Other times, she'd talk about the hard parts, how she still woke up expecting to see James next to her, or how trust felt like something distant, almost unreachable. I listened, knowing I couldn't take her pain away, but I could at least be someone who heard it. Then Emily reached out. It started with a short text. Can we talk? I stared at my phone for a long time before replying. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. We met at a small park, sitting at opposite ends of a bench. She looked tired, like she hadn't been sleeping well. For a while, she didn't speak. Then she said, I miss you. I don't want us to stay like this. I didn't answer right away. My thoughts were tangled. Emily, you didn't just hurt Sarah. You hurt me too. You put me in a position I never wanted to be in. She nodded, her eyes on the ground. I know. I was selfish. I thought I was following my heart, but I wasn't thinking about anyone else. I regret it every day. Her voice sounded honest, but my chest still felt heavy. I don't know if I can trust you again, I admitted. Some things, they don't go back to how they were. She sighed, wiping at her eyes. I just want a chance to make it right, even if it takes time. We sat there in silence for a while. I didn't promise her anything. I didn't cut her off either. I left it hanging, knowing I needed to figure out what I was willing to give. After that, she sent me a few messages here and there, short updates, small attempts to keep a connection. I replied sometimes, but I kept my distance. Sarah didn't ask for details about my conversations with Emily. She just said, "Do what you feel is best for you." I wasn't sure what best was. Forgiveness sounded simple when people talked about it, but in reality, it was a slow, uneven road, and I wasn't ready to decide where it would lead. Sarah's life started to look different as the months passed. She moved into a smaller apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a place that was entirely her own. She chose new furniture, different colors, and filled the space with things that made her feel calm. She went out more, met new people through work and mutual friends, and even started taking a weekend pottery class. She still carried a certain caution in her eyes, but there was also strength there now, something steady and unshakable. We didn't talk about James much anymore. When his name came up, it was in a flat, factual way, about legal paperwork or something he left behind. It wasn't that she had forgotten, it was that she had learned to live without the weight of him pressing on her every day. I kept my own life moving too, though there was still an emptiness I couldn't quite name. My relationship with Emily stayed polite but distant. We weren't fighting, but we weren't close either. I had accepted that it might always be this way. The rest of our friend group never fully recovered from what happened. Some stayed close to me, others drifted toward James or Emily, and a few just kept their distance from all of us. Family gatherings were quieter, with more pauses in conversation, as if everyone was careful not to bring up the wrong. Sometimes I thought about how one moment had changed everything, how walking into that room had set off a chain reaction I couldn't undo. There were days when I wished I could go back and unknow what I saw, just to keep the peace. But that thought never lasted long. I knew the truth would have come out eventually, and keeping it from Sarah would have been another kind of betrayal. I had lost a lot: my closeness with Emily, the easy trust of some friends, the feeling of belonging in my own family. But Sarah had been spared a life built on love. That mattered more than the rest. One afternoon, we sat together in her new apartment, drinking tea while sunlight streamed through the window. She laughed at something small I said, and for a moment, it felt like we had gone back to the way things were before. But I knew we couldn't truly go back. The trust we had in the world had changed, and maybe it always would be. I looked at her then, stronger but still guarded, and I thought about everything it had cost to get here. I had told the truth, and it had taken away almost everyone I loved. If I had to do it all over again, I would still tell her. Because no matter the cost, she deserved to know. What would you have done if you caught your best friend's spouse with your own sibling? Would you tell and risk breaking everything apart, or keep the secret to protect the people you love? I'm curious to know your answer. Share it in the comments. And if you like real, messy stories about loyalty, trust, and betrayal, stick around because there's more to come.